Yana, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
You said something. So, Yana Litins'ka, you are a researcher here at Lund University. Can you tell me about your background?
Absolutely. I'm a lawyer by degree. I received my master's degree in Ukraine. I come from Ukraine. I also work as a lawyer in various healthcare centers where I used to sit a couple of days during the week and consult my clients. And I also used to represent various clients in court proceedings. And then I decided that it's more fun to do an academic degree and to do some more research. And I received a doctoral student position in Uppsala, Sweden. So I moved to Uppsala and I completed my doctoral studies there. And then I received an opportunity to work as a postdoctoral researcher at Lund University, where I am at the moment.
What is your research focused on right now?
Well, I am in between of two research projects. My postdoctoral research project focuses on accessibility of healthcare services for various groups of migrants, but foremost asylum seekers. And there I specifically analyzed the Swedish law provisions. I also focus on European Union law provisions, and one of my absolutely favorite focuses is human rights. So I analyze how United Nations and Council of Europe International Human Rights Treaty functions and what kind of rights they guarantee to asylum seekers. I am also starting another project very soon, and it's about the preparedness for the future pandemics. And this is an interdisciplinary research that I'm very much looking forward to start together with a group of researchers, other researchers at Lund University and also at EUGLOH University.
Right now there are millions of refugees in Europe. Do they get the same access to the healthcare system as we do as European citizens?
Well, it's a very complicated question that has several layers of answer. First off, it's important to point out that European Union citizens do not get the same access to healthcare. It really depends where one lives. For example, in Sweden, we receive healthcare services not free of charge, but subsidized by state, almost free of charge, just because we live here, just because we are, for example, citizens or have legal rights to reside. Whereas in other countries, it really depends on whether one is entitled to have certain insurance. And this insurance can, for example, depend on whether one has specific type of job or whether one needs to buy this type of insurance. So healthcare in Europe is not something that looks absolutely homogeneous among the member states. And the second question is, what kind of healthcare do you, for example, my focus of research is asylum seekers, as I mentioned before. What kind of access to healthcare do they get? And it also depends on the member state. For example, in Sweden, this group gets something that is called care that cannot wait. And what does it mean? It really quite often depends on how a specific healthcare practitioner interprets this issue and how this issue is interpreted at this specific region.
Does the origin of the asylum seekers, does that matter to what degree they get access to healthcare?
It's a very good question. There are answers to this question on different levels. We can focus on what does the legal system grant to various groups of asylum seekers, or we can focus on what is that is happening in practice. What kind of bias do exist within the healthcare? If we focus on the legal systems, what is that should be done, one can say, then there are also multiple answers depending on where we look. If we look at the Swedish legal system, then it should be the same for everyone. But if we, for example, look at the Council of Europe legal system, there is a specific convention that is called the European Social Charter. And this convention is a little bit unusual because it was created in a way that the states were trying to achieve reciprocity. So in accordance with this convention, it really depends whether you are a citizen of a member state of this convention or no. If we focus on the level of application, I had a very good example from my student. I used to teach for the medical students, and they suggested an example when we are talking about care that cannot wait for asylum seekers or undocumented migrants, that quite often people tend to, especially in healthcare, people tend to be probably more benevolent and give more care to citizens or to persons that understand specific language, for example, speak English. My students suggested an example to compare a person that comes from the US and is undocumented migrant and a person who comes from the other country, for example, Somalia. And according to this student of mine, there are much more bias that exist in healthcare towards people who look differently and who probably don't speak the same language. And I think he is quite right there.
Have you done any studies where you compare different health laws in different countries?
Indeed, this is my favorite part of these studies. I did this while I was a doctoral student. Then I compared English, Swedish and Russian legal systems. And in my postdoctoral project, I have an overview of 31 legal systems. But we can also talk about different types of comparison. We can talk about horizontal comparison when we are comparing different legal system, national legal system. For example, I compare Sweden with England. And we can also talk about vertical comparison. It's the situation when we are comparing, for example, whether international human rights law, the standard that exists within international human rights law with the standards that exist on the national level or on the European Union level. So it's different types of comparison. And comparisons are a lot of fun, but they are also very demanding.
Why is it important to do these comparisons?
There are many reasons why these comparisons are important. One of those reasons is that it's very important for harmonizations of the legal system. Sometimes it's required by law to harmonize legal systems, sometimes it's not. There is also an interesting standard that is used in the practice of European Court of Human Rights that is called European Consensus. And this standard means that we need to understand what is that is going on within different legal systems within the Council of Europe in order to say that this specific state, Sweden for example, can act in this specific manner. So quite often it's required by law. On the other hand, comparisons are also very important for the purposes of creating legal theories. They are also important for understanding whether we need to change our legislation in a specific way to inspire legislator is something that comparisons are quite often used for. And they also allow experiential learning. That is that if we know how this mechanism functions here and there, we probably can avoid similar mistakes within our legal system.
How do you look upon the role of European alliances between universities, such as EUGLOH?
I think it's a fantastic initiative that allows not only researchers but also students, as far as I understood, to collaborate with one another to find out about the perspective on research, teaching, etc. on that exist within different countries. So I'm totally for this kind of initiatives. I think that this is something developing for each individual. As a migrant myself, I experienced that probably this kind of experience is something that is very much challenging, but is also something that leads to development and becoming probably a better researcher, a better student, a better you.
If you had to convince a student to go and study medical law, what would you do to convince him or her?
In most of the cases, I don't have to convince my students to study medical law because they know how much fun is that. But if I have to, I would probably remind that every one of us has been a patient at one point of our life, or will be a patient at one point of our life. And I think medical law is an area for curious minds, because it's never boring here. Why is it never boring with the medical law? Because medical law is something that combines many different disciplines together. For example, it combines various types of legal disciplines. It's public law, it's civil law, it's human rights law, you name it. But it is also an area that, by name of it, presupposes certain multidisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity. So it's a combination of medicine to some degree. We need to know what is happening within other fields. It's quite often ethical question that we deal with, so it's a lot of philosophy that can be found within our discipline. AI questions are coming to our field quite extensively. Epidemiological issues are there, of course, so there are many different perspectives. It's never boring with medical law.
Yana Litins'ka, thank you very much for joining on this coffee break.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.